Hello world, this is Dolphin Doug in sunny, beautiful Juneau, Alaska. We're here at the North Douglas boat ramp because this is a special place for me, and I'm going to answer the question of how to see northern lights on your cruise to Alaska and the one thing you should bring. I've got 5 ways to help you see northern lights. Now, I'm going to start out with the one thing you should bring, which is a tent. And you don't have to set up your tent until after you see the northern lights. I'll answer why at the end of this video. So, I'm a whale watching guy here in Juneau. So I don't pretend to be an expert on northern lights, but I know an awful lot of people, when they come up to Alaska, they want to see northern lights. You can look at the weather right now, and you probably think this is not a good day, and you'd be right. This is October 15th. This weather is a little bit drearier than normal. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning, and this is as bright as it's going to get. We're looking north, and that matters for a different reason. If you're lucky, you're going to see an airplane. I think the airplanes are still flying, but right over there on the far side of those trees, a mile off, I can just see the hangars, is Juneau's airport. So, doing the skinny, the northern lights are also called Aurora Borealis. You can use the names interchangeably. It's kind of like our 5 kinds of Alaskan salmon. They all have 2 different names. So if you call them northern lights or Aurora Borealis, and that's Latin, so you can do it either way. I named my daughter Aurora, and so I've got a particular liking to that name, but I hear northern lights all the time. So the key thing is northern lights come out year-round, particularly when there's sunspot activity. It's a little bit predictable, and it's predictable a couple of days in advance. You got my camera on the back of my Dodge Ram pickup, and the air shocks just decided to adjust. Don't buy a Dodge Ram with air shocks if you want to live in Alaska, but they work really well about 8 months out of the year. Anyway, so the first biggest picture, the skinny, if you really want the quick and down and dirty answer, is if you want to see northern lights on your cruise to Alaska, you can just forget about it. The chance of you seeing northern lights are very, very slim. Virtually nobody does. But if you're still interested, keep watching, because I do have some clues. We're fighting against a bunch of different things. What did I come up with? A list of 6. The first is, and these aren't all bad, first is latitude. To see northern lights, you got to get north. Cruising to Alaska is a good way to do that, so you can check box that one. The second one is that you need to be in a place that doesn't have much light. Well, how many light fixtures do you see around here? This actually isn't the best place because Juneau itself is all to the north of us, but it's not bad. You need to get away from light. If you're cruising to Alaska, you're on a ship, you're a long ways from anything else. If there are northern lights, you as a passenger on that ship have absolute ability. I'm giving it to you. Go scream at your crew. Don't scream, ask nicely, and say, turn off all the stinking non-navigation lights. We want to watch the northern lights off the top of this ship. It happens. They will do it if somebody asks. Different ships are different. I'm not saying one thing on one line or the other, but if somebody doesn't say it, they might not do it because they see northern lights. And it's funny to say this, it's not being derogatory at all. Sometimes they don't want to interfere with other people's lives. I've heard they will pass pods of orcas intermixed with humpback whales on a cruise ship, and some of these ships will avoid that if it's dinner time because they don't want everybody leaping up. I've heard literally everybody on the ship will run to one side for northern lights or whales, which is an intermittent thing, and it isn't something that always works well on those ships. So I'm not saying anything bad towards any ship. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you sometimes need to say turn off the lights is my guess. Depends on the ship. So and you'll have crew members on the ship that absolutely on your side to try to get as many people to see them as you can. So next is you need northern exposure. Well, I'm looking north. There's a ridge of mountains back there. You don't need to know that. They're low enough. That's what you're generally going to see all the way up to Fairbanks. Fairbanks, Alaska is the perfect latitude because the northern lights is a ring around the pole that expands and contracts with activity. So when they're brighter, they tend to be further south. But in Fairbanks, that's the right latitude, so you tend to look straight up. If you're up in Barrow, generally you're going to be looking south, and everywhere else you have to look north to see them. Not the last, got a couple more, but one is sunlight. You cannot see northern lights from April 15th through August 15th at all. It just doesn't get dark enough. that residual light. I have stood out on my back deck just past midnight, and I could barely read a newspaper. That was a couple of years ago. I don't even actually read the newspaper anymore, but that's how bright it is. You can't see them with the light. So the next aspect, which you do have some control over, is the moon. If you want to see northern lights in Alaska, book your cruise so that when you're at the northern end of it, you're at a new moon. The full moon blocks out the northern lights. That's up on you. In between moons, you just got to be out when the moon's not above the horizon. And the last thing, of course, is what you're seeing today, clouds. August 15th to October 15th, the best time of year to cruise to Alaska and see northern lights. The weather tends to be cloudier than the rest of the year. It's not a great opportunity. This is why I say you're chasing a unicorn. We do get beautiful sunny days. If we had a clear night, there would be hard frost in the morning because they were just so far north. But there you go. So that's your list of issues that you need to deal with, that you need to work around, some of which those clouds you can't predict. But if you're going to do this, now I'm going to get to my clues on how you can make it better. First of all, really consider a cross-Gulf trip. If the weather's bad in southeast Alaska, as those ships go north, and the farther north you are, the more chance you have, you're possibly going to get to a different weather system. So if you have good, clear nights anywhere along that cruise, that's your chance. You can still see good northern lights in Ketchikan if you're off on a ship a long way from lights and you've got a clear exposure to the north, which on a cruise ship you probably will. But the further north you go, the better off you are. The second one is absolutely mid-August till the end of the season is your really only chance. Any other time, just completely forget about it. I mean, literally, at midnight, it's pointless to be out there. The third idea is spend a couple of extra days in Anchorage. Some of the cruise ships, most of the cruise ships try to put people on and off during the weekend. But if you take one of these alternate ships that maybe show up at a slightly different time, you might be able to fit that in. 2 or 3 days, rent a car, figure out some way you can get away from the Anchorage urban district, because even if there are no clouds, the ambient light from the city knocks it down. Take a 50-mile drive, ask the locals at your hotel where the best spot to go. North Douglas Boat Ramp is a good spot in Juneau because we're a long ways from any of the streetlights. The fourth idea, and it does make a huge difference, is take that land tour. You probably want to take it after the cruise, and you definitely want to be that far north spot during that new moon. But then you're going to probably be staying at a small, remote northern lodge, maybe not as good northern exposure, but the people there, if you ask around, are going to tell you where and when you might have the best chance of seeing it. So all of the major cruise lines do something in there. It'll take you 2 weeks instead of 1 week. You can do just the land version if you want. You're going to miss an awful lot on the cruise side. People really, the vast majority of people come on the cruises. It's, you know, the cruise ships are 3,000, 4,000 people coming through here. In the interior, they're traveling a little bit by train, but mostly it's 50 passenger buses. It's a tiny fraction of the people, which means if you do it, you're gonna have a smaller crowd, different experience, it'll be a wonderful time. But that's also a much better chance of getting good exposure. Now, when you do that, the other thing to remember, I said stay in Anchorage. Some of you might be flying to and from Fairbanks. Fairbanks is that perfect latitude. Fairbanks itself is not a great place to see northern lights, but around it is spectacular. In my mind, the world's best place, at least Alaska's best place to see northern lights, is Circle Hot Springs, which is north and east of Fairbanks. They have a magnificent facility. They are miles and miles from the electric grid. They have to produce their own electricity, and you can sit out in a hot spring and everybody knows the lights are going to be off if the northern lights are up. It used to be a very relaxed, cushy, simple Alaskan thing, and it's gone a little bit upscale. If you want to do it, do it. And again, if you're here from mid-April to mid-August, it might be wonderful and nice up there. That's not the place to be. You can certainly go up there in the wintertime too, and that's an even better chance. Not that you have more northern lights in the winter. I mean, October's are perfectly fine. You can get a spectacular, wonderful viewing in October. It's just you tend to be out more during the hours when they're coming out because, you know, it's dark during that wintertime. So, the last idea, and I'm really trying to sell you on this idea that northern lights shouldn't be your priority. The last final idea, if you want to see northern lights, is go to a bar and get yourself punched out. I don't mean violence, and I don't want you to think about it, but I've run out of ideas on how to get you northern lights. So please don't do that last one. Please come up to Alaska and have a wonderful time. And that's not quite all I have to say. Let's see. Oh, a couple clues. If you're coming up here, like I said earlier, you're the one who wants to make that northern lights happen. When you get on your ship, ask your crew about northern lights. There will be crew members. The bridge knows when the northern lights are coming. They have nothing better to do. And so you need to ask them, and they will tell you where and when and what the chances are. The second one is type into Google Aurora activity, and you'll find a website. The one I went to was gi.alaska.edu, but it's going to have an Aurora predictor, and it doesn't work very far in advance. I just checked today, and it's a 5, which is good. 7, I think, is the best, and a 1 and 2 is forget it. 3, if you're in Fairbanks, you might be worth going out for. But what difference does it make that it's a 5 today with weather like this? So here in Juneau, I really haven't seen them all that often. And the last thing is that tent. Try Googling Northern Lights and tent, and you'll see some absolutely spectacular images of a tent with the northern lights over the top. To me, it just closes the whole picture. Whether you can capture that picture or not, I don't know. But I just thought you should look at those, and it gives you some feel for what you might see. Now, the reason I brought you out here is because way back in 1994, I lived not too far away in a little cabin up in the woods. We had electricity. I wasn't that rural, but we heard from somebody there might be northern lights, and my wife and I drove out to this boat ramp. It was the middle of night. It was cold, and I stood here on the parking lot right behind me with just her and occasional cars driving by on the road up above us. And the northern lights were there. They were green and they shifted to red. You can see those in the photos. But I literally reached down and threw up rocks to try to see. Of course you can't. They're 300, 400, I don't know how many hundreds of miles up there. But it literally looked like I could grab the stuff. It shifts around and moves. It was absolutely eye-dropping spectacular. It didn't happen the next night, and I have never seen it that good since. Fairbanks, you get that every winter. Not on a regular basis. You don't want to aim for that, but it's there. And so I really could have titled this How to See Northern Lights in Alaska. Number 1, move to Fairbanks. Number 2, move to Alaska and spend enough time up here and you'll get a good show. So there you go. I guess all I have left to say is wherever you go and whatever you're doing, stay warm and dry, and I hope you have extra tufts.